Dinosaurs versus literal gods.
It's time to take one coaster and take another coaster to find out what's the better one. And put some points together through some arbitrary measures and add them up before we're done. And while it should be a given, it's just my opinion. If you don't like it, don't leave a comment, just leave. It's just a stupid video.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Mario. This is a channel all about amusement park type stuff, but mostly coasters. And today we're going to try and determine which coaster is better. Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg or VelociCoaster at Universal's Islands of Adventure. But right before we do that, the comment section winner of the Medusa versus Kraken video was Kraken by quite a large margin. But anyway, let's get into this one. Pantheon and VelociCoaster are brand new Intamin LSM launch coasters, and they do certainly share quite a lot of similarities. For starters, they are two world-class coasters, and they definitely each have a case as the star attraction at their respective park. Additionally, both rides offer great launches, fast pacing, amazing airtime and inversions, and both seem to get better as the ride goes on. But what I'm more interested in is how they differ, so let's put these coasters head to head to figure out which one's better, starting with their stats. VelociCoaster has a top height of 155 feet, whereas Pantheon reaches 178. First point to Pantheon. The speed differential between these coasters is quite small, but Pantheon takes another point with a top speed of 73 miles per hour, whereas VelociCoaster reaches 70. As far as inversions go, VelociCoaster has 4 and Pantheon has 2, giving VelociCoaster its first point. Those numbers are flipped when it comes to the ride's launches, with VelociCoaster having 2 and this time Pantheon having 4. Point to Pantheon. When it comes to the steepest drops on both of these coasters, Pantheon gets to a staggering 95 degrees, whereas VelociCoaster only reaches 80. Point to Pantheon. Pantheon has a track length of 3,328 feet, and VelociCoaster has a track length of 4,711. Point to VelociCoaster, even though Pantheon does travel some of the track multiple times. And for our final stat, ride duration, we'll be measuring this from the acceleration of the first launch until the beginning of the final brakes. For Pantheon, we're excluding the section right out of the station, and for VelociCoaster, we are excluding that pre-launch theming. So with all that said, VelociCoaster has a prime ride time of 1 minute and 9 seconds, whereas Pantheon falls a little bit short with a ride duration of 1 minute and 5 seconds. Point to VelociCoaster. And after stats, Pantheon has a slim lead of 4-3. But now let's get into the fun part, ride elements. Starting off with comparable elements, we'll be taking a look at the ride's first launches. Both coasters start off with a relatively short, yet punchy launch. VelociCoaster's is undoubtedly enhanced by the ride's phenomenal theming, but even looking past that, it does just feel a tad more forceful and faster than Pantheon's, giving VelociCoaster the point. Staying on the topic of launches, we have VelociCoaster's second launch and Pantheon's fourth launch, both of which are the fastest on their respective ride. Each coaster enters their launch with a fair bit of speed, however, VelociCoaster is traveling slower, which results in a more forceful launch, and it also passes through a tunnel which provides a better setting for the launch, giving VelociCoaster the point. And if you're wondering why I ignored the hill in Pantheon's launch, that's because it's the next element we'll be comparing. VelociCoaster's speed hill is good, but despite providing a brief pop of airtime, it certainly doesn't stand out. Pantheon travels its speed hill a total of 3 times, with one of those being backwards, and each pass gets better and better. But even if you just look at the single best traversing of this one element, Pantheon speed hill crushes VelociCoaster's. The way it's shaped results in stronger airtime that is also more sustained, so Pantheon gets the easy point on this one. Pantheon speed hill is followed by a top hat, and each of these coasters' top hats is the ride's highest point. While Pantheon's top hat is taller and has a steeper drop, I actually think VelociCoaster's is better. It just feels a little tighter, and I feel like no matter where you sit, you are going to be out of your seat for the entire duration of the element. On Pantheon, you sort of experience the element in two parts. It's a little less fluid. You come out of your seat going up, return to your seat at the top, and then you come back out of your seat going down. Ultimately, VelociCoaster gets the point for being a bit more fluid. Following the top hats are the coaster's 0G stalls, and both are honestly so great that it is really hard to pick one. VelociCoaster's does feel a tad whippier and faster, while Pantheon seems to be longer in both duration and physical length. If I absolutely had to pick though, I'd say Pantheon's is a tad better because you are out of your seat longer, and it also has some nice hand choppers. Point to Pantheon, but that was a very tough one. Now on to the rolls. Both rides do have rolls, but the comparison isn't exactly apples to apples. Pantheon's first inversion is taken very slowly, and VelociCoaster's Mosasaurus roll is aggressively fast. The similarity that these inversions do share is that they both do a great job of getting you out of your seat, but the over-the-water setting and breakneck whip of VelociCoaster's gives it the point. Another less direct but surprisingly competitive comparison is the wave turns. VelociCoaster's provides long, sideways floater airtime, with Pantheon's being more abrupt yet aggressive. The added lateral G-forces and stronger airtime give Pantheon the slight edge here, and another point. Slightly more arbitrary are the ride's smaller airtime hills towards the beginning. VelociCoaster has one with a very strong pop of ejector airtime, and a very weak off-axis hill with very minimal airtime, if any. Pantheon has two solid outer banked airtime hills back to back, which are taken at a slower pace but do provide strong floater airtime in addition to very wonky lateral forces. I'll take these two consistent hills, giving Pantheon the point. And lastly, for comparable elements, we have each coaster's final turns. I know this might seem like a silly category, but both of these are definitely underrated elements if you ask me. And I do have a strong preference of one over the other. Pantheon's turns do give great laterals, and they are taken at a scary fast speed, but VelociCoasters have all that, as well as strong ejector airtime in between. So because of that, VelociCoaster gets the point. And now, with a tied score, let's take a look at each ride's unique elements, starting with Pantheon. As previously mentioned, Pantheon boasts 2 extra launches, and it will get a point for each. Even though they take place on the same section of track, both uniquely contribute to the ride experience, with one being from a slower speed and feeling more forceful, and the other being faster, and not to mention, backwards. Pantheon also has one of the best elements between these two rides, its massive outward banked hill. This element is amazing, and VelociCoaster doesn't have any answer to it. And on the other side of that swing launch, we have the vertical spike. It's another great airtime moment, so another point. For VelociCoaster, we'll start off with its Immelman and head into its dive loop. Both provide airtime and hang time, and both earn it a point. And now, while it may seem silly, VelociCoaster does have a lot of extra turns that Pantheon does not. None of them stand out enough to be acknowledged on their own, but together they certainly contribute a point's worth of fun and excitement. And last but not least, we have this little outer bank. And I know that Pantheon has that huge outer bank hill, but this one on VelociCoaster is so different that it did not feel right to compare them. This one is not really a hill at all, but it is really aggressively whippy and fun, and it is definitely deserving of a point. So after that, we are all tied up at 12-12. But let's see if one of these coasters can break ahead in the ride experience category. Starting with the ride forces, let's take a look at airtime. Both coasters are packed with negative G-forces, lifting you out of your seat both gently and aggressively. So to determine a winner of this evenly matched subcategory, I tried to look at some numbers. Based on my estimate from the ride POVs, Pantheon gives you 15 moments of negative G-forces and 27 seconds of those same forces, and on the other hand, VelociCoaster provides 13 moments and only 18 seconds. And I found this to be quite surprising, but since I don't prefer the type of airtime on one ride to the other, I'm going to go ahead and give Pantheon the point. As far as the positive Gs, those intense forces that push you into your seat, well, this one was not close at all. While the positives are not the focus of either ride, VelociCoaster does have a couple of tight turns and transitions in the beginning of the coaster that do provide some noticeable forces. And on the flip side, I can't think of a single moment on Pantheon where I noticed the positive G-forces at all. So point to VelociCoaster. And the final force, lateral G-forces, is definitely much closer, but VelociCoaster takes this as well. I think it just has more moments where you are quickly transitioning from one way to the other, so you really get tossed around, and just a bit more than you do on Pantheon. Now for pacing. This is incredibly difficult. Neither of these rides have any dead spots. Both have moments in the beginning of the ride where you aren't traveling as quickly as the rest of the ride, but you do something the entirety of both coasters. But if anything, the back and forth of Pantheon's swing launches could, I guess, be perceived as the slightest bit of a slowdown in pacing, because the ride does come to a split second of a stop going up the top hat the first time and going up the vertical spike. So I think I barely have to give the point to VelociCoaster, because you do technically slow down in the middle of the ride for Pantheon, even if it is while giving great floater airtime. In my mind, however, I have a clear favorite for intensity, and that is VelociCoaster. As previously mentioned, both coasters have equal strength of airtime, similar speeds, and one of the only areas they differ is positive G-forces and laterals, which are arguably the most intense aspects of a roller coaster, so another point to VelociCoaster. On the flip side, Pantheon does feel more re-rideable for those that can't handle intensity, thus making it more quote-unquote fun, in my opinion. Both coasters are obviously fun though, don't get me wrong on that. But one of the reasons I do think Pantheon is a tad more fun is the comfort of it. VelociCoaster can be a little shaky and the slightest bit unpleasant sometimes, while all of the rides I had on Pantheon had never been anything other than perfectly smooth. And with that, going into the final round, VelociCoaster has a 1-point lead with a score of 15 to 16. But let's see if Pantheon can catch up in the other category. Starting off with theming, it's actually really close in this. I'm kidding. It's obviously VelociCoaster. On and off ride, this is one of the best themed coasters. Not even close. But a category that is actually close is the setting. If we try our best to separate this from theming, I know for VelociCoaster it's almost impossible to do that, but Pantheon's proximity to the Rhine River and lush greenery does give it a fighting chance. But unfortunately for it, VelociCoaster spends its ride flying over the water, pathways, and plant life, so it gets another point. VelociCoaster extends its lead even further with operations, as it has some of the fastest in the world, plain and simple. Now, both coasters have a very strict loose article policy, with VelociCoaster even requiring you to pass through metal detectors before you ride, but you do at least get to take most of your belongings through a majority of the queue line, and the lockers that you are required to use are free. So, point to VelociCoaster, and that's it. With a final score of 15 to 20, VelociCoaster handily takes the cake. And it's not surprising why. We have all been knowing for a while that yes, this is an amazing roller coaster, but it is so much more than that. What really gave it the win wasn't what the track does, but rather what the overall VelociCoaster experience delivers. Both are absolutely fantastic rides though, so I want you all to vote in the comments down below which coaster you think is better. We'll announce the comment winner in the next coaster versus coaster video, and also go ahead and let me know what coasters you want to see go head to head in the future. But thank you guys so much for watching. Go ahead and give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this, and make sure to tune in next time for VelociCoaster versus Pteranodon Flyers.